Remind everyone that this meeting is being broadcast live via the internet. I wanted to start by noting that we have, Mr. Franz, could you help me on this? So we have two board members that are not here today that are on this committee.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Got your own microphone?
I do.
Wow, that's good.
Thanks to Ms. Mitchell as of the last meeting. Mr. Anwar is definitely under the weather. I spoke to him this morning about, 7 o'clock. And Mr. Raven is preoccupied with litigation and expects to be at the board meeting tomorrow, but unfortunately cannot make it today.
And so I think we're talking about clarifying that the whole thing about getting an excuse, but we're going to go ahead today and excuse them.
Okay.
Good, if I have a motion to.
Okay.
Okay. Dr. Farias, is there a second? Mr. Plank, all in favor say aye. Aye. And so what we've just done, is officially excuse them from today's committee meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The first agenda item is approval of the minutes from the January 24th, 2018 Agency Operations Committee meeting. Do I have a motion for approval? So moved. Dr. Farias, second. You can take some time.
I'll second that.
Okay, second by Mr. Flank. We ready to vote? Does anybody want to look through them, or are you ready? Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. The next item on our agenda is public testimony. We've not received any requests for public testimony. Is that correct? So we'll move on to the next item. The first item under agency operations is consideration of adopting the staff's recommendation to the committee relating to the agency's 2018 customer service report. Ms. Linda Battles, Deputy Commissioner for Agency Operations and Communications, COO, will present this report. Ms. Battles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before I begin, I'd like to say on behalf of the Commissioner, he apologizes for not being here today. He's down at the Capitol, and he was providing testimony on the update on 60x30 text before the Senate Higher Education Committee. So he was on a panel with Commissioner Morath and Commissioner Alcantara from the Texas Workforce Commission. So I was there briefly for his presentation. He did a great job, but he had some tough questions to answer. And when I left, they were getting ready to start on Commissioner Morath's testimony. So again, apologize for him not being here. I'm going to be reporting on the customer service report for 2018. This report looks back for the last 2 years. And before I begin, I just want you to know that one of the agency's operational goals in our 5-year strategic plan is to recruit and retain skilled and knowledgeable staff in order to provide excellent customer service. And this really aligns nicely with the statewide objective that Governor Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Patrick, and Speaker Strauss laid out for us, that every state agency be attentive to providing excellent customer service. So very quickly, my presentation is going to cover the following: a very brief overview of statutory requirements related to customer service and complaints, the process that we undertook to assess customer service satisfaction and the results that we received from that assessment, specific recommendations from our customers, what we're hearing from them, and what improvements we've implemented over the last 2 years to address some complaints, and what we're going to do now, what we're doing now and in the near future to address some more complaints. So all state agencies are required to have a customer relations representative, and I serve in that role. I've been serving in this role since 2004. Statutes also require us to establish a compact with Texans, which we've had in place for 20 years. And it's a statement of our customer service principles and our standard response times, as well as our procedures for responding to inquiries and complaints. We are required to biannually assess our customer satisfaction and submit a report to the governor's office and the LBB by June 1 every even-numbered year. So that's what we're doing today. Our board rules also provide for a process for student complaints, and we are We've actually had these rules in our board rules since 2012, when the U.S. Department of Education issued its program integrity regulations, which requires every state to have a student complaint procedure in order for public and private institutions to be eligible for federal financial aid. And those complaints currently are handled by our Student Complaints Office under the General Counsel's Office. And then finally, our own enabling statutes for the coordinating board require the agency to maintain a record of written complaints. And currently, what we use is what's called the Customer Relationship and Feedback Tracking System, which we also refer to as the CRAFT system. And this system is a software application that our IT staff was able to acquire from TxDOT back in 2013, I believe, free of cost. So we implemented that and we started to roll it out in 2014, department by department, and now we are fully utilizing that agency-wide. Since fully implementing it, we've had about 48,000 records in the CRAFT system. And by far the largest user of the CRAFT system is our borrower services. You know, as you know, we have a $1.5 billion loan program that we administer. We service approximately 232,000 loans per year. We also provide loan repayment assistance to a variety of constituents. So it's one of our biggest operations where we have direct interactions with customers on a daily basis. So you'll see a lot of the complaints and improvements that we've made really focus on that area of the agency. So the process for assessing customer satisfaction, we use a Likert scale survey, which obtains a respondent's agreement to a statement or a set of statements. So for example, one of our survey statements is, overall, I am satisfied with the agency's, with my action, overall, I'm satisfied with my experience. And then the response options are strongly agree, neutral, and so forth. Our survey includes 9 statements relating to the statutorily required service quality elements, which are listed here on this slide. The survey is available on our website to everybody that visits our website, and it is also sent directly to all of the customers that receive a response from us via the CRAFT system. So for purposes of the report that I'm going to be covering today, we looked at survey responses that we received from mid-March of 2016 to mid-March of 2018. One of the requirements of the customer service report is to identify the types of external customers we serve. And as you know, we serve a very diverse group of customers, from students, parents, loan borrowers, institutions of higher education, policymakers. Survey respondents categorize themselves as shown on this pie chart. The majority of the survey respondents were students at 34%, followed by institutions of higher education at 20%. Of the approximately 32,000 customers that received our survey directly, only about 1,300 responded, which yields a 4.3% response rate. 64% of the respondents agreed or strongly agreed with the statement that they were satisfied overall with the agency and their experience with the agency. Of the remaining 8 service quality elements that were assessed, the 3 that scored the highest related to staff courtesy, staff knowledge, and the cleanliness of the facility. But the 3 that scored the lowest related to how their complaint was handled. 50% disagreed or strongly agreed that their complaint was handled in a reasonable and timely manner. The other was about the website. The website, 31% said that they disagreed or strongly disagreed that the website was easy to use and easy to navigate. And then the third lowest was requests for services, where 29% disagreed or strongly disagreed that their request for services was handled in a reasonable and timely manner. So this really helps us kind of sift out where our weaknesses are and where we need to focus future efforts. Of those survey respondents, you'll see here the breakout of the comments that they actually provided. There is a space on the survey for them to provide written comments, and we categorize them as either positive, negative, or providing specific suggestions for improvement. So again, as I mentioned before, the largest user of the CRAFT system is our borrower services, so it's no surprise that most of the complaints are coming from our loan borrowers. So you'll see here on this slide, the complaints really centered on the website, really specifically to our loan management website, and our call center, as well as the length of loan application processing. And from those comments, we received some improvements, some suggested improvements relating to improving the online access to borrowers' account information, improving the payment options for our borrowers, and just improving the loan program website. Many of these borrowers have loans with other entities such as banks and other authorities, lending authorities, and they're sort of used to that, industry grade level of service, and we, struggle in terms of our resources here, in terms of what we can offer through our IT resources and so forth. As you know, we've been talking about how under-resourced our IT area is, and so we've been trying to improve that over time, but we are reliant a lot on general revenue to support some of those improvements. The others, we obviously use loan funds to help us support that as well, but we still have a limited number of staff and time to be able to devote to the loan program and in making improvements there. Some of the improvements that we have made over the last couple of years, one of the biggest one is upgrading our loan program management system known as HELMS, and you'll see some of the improvements that we've made there. But we still recognize that we still have a lot more to do. And again, that's going to require some IT resources to implement. We also, at the end of 2016, and at the direction of the commissioner, engaged an outside consultant, Weaver LLP, to review the operations of the loan program. And that review resulted in 66 recommendations for improving the loan program operations across 8 process areas, including customer service. But again, due to limited resources, we've had to prioritize the implementation of those recommendations by really focusing on those areas that were categorized as high risk or moderate risk if we didn't address them quickly. Another major thing that we did just recently in February of this year is upgrading our phone system. The previous system was really antiquated. It had really reached its end of life because it was no longer supported by the original equipment manufacturer. So we had several occasions where the system would go down and it would take several hours to figure out how to get it back up. And whenever that happens, our borrowers really face significant inconveniences because they're trying to make their payments and so forth. And so we get a lot of complaints there. So we're very pleased that we are able to upgrade the phone system. You can see some of the features that help in terms of improving customer service. One that I like, which I've been exposed to just calling, on personal business, other agencies or businesses, is the automated callback, where you can basically, your call is in a queue, and so whenever it's your turn to talk to a representative, you're automatically called back, so you don't have to sit there and wait on the line. So And finally, the other major thing that we are doing is upgrading our agency website. Now, this is separate and apart from our loan website, our loan program website, but based on past customer satisfaction assessments, we hear, and today even, we hear all the time that our agency website is very very difficult to navigate. It's not user-friendly. There's way too much information on the website, and I see a lot of nodding heads. And so we had tried to, one of the reasons why it's not been updated for over a decade is because we've not had the resources to do this. We asked the legislature for several sessions for an exceptional item to help support this, because we have a vast amount of data and information, and we just automatically put everything up there. But I think once we started going through the exercise of trying to distill what are the most important pieces of data and information that our audiences need to have, we quickly realized that a lot of our own staff were using the website as a filing cabinet so that it's easily accessible. They know where it is, but does our audience really need to have that information out there? So we looked at the analytics, we looked at how often a particular page got a hit to try and focus more on the most commonly accessed web pages. And I should say that all of this has been done using existing resources. We've got a great group of staff from across the agency that each executive officer appointed a staff from their division or department to represent the website governance committee, and they have been meeting for months, talking about what does this look like. First of all, it's gonna have a much more modern look and feel to it, and then working with their staff to distill the most important information that should be on our website. So I really want to commend that group who've been working so diligently. They're also working on standards going forward on what can be put up on the website, so there's more control of the content and so forth. So just to kind of give you an idea of, this is our current main web page. You'll see that we have off to the side, the menu has 27 options off to the left side bar menu, and then off across has another 5 tabs. And when you click on each of those, you can keep clicking and keep deep diving into the information, and it gets very difficult to navigate. We also have a lot of text. If you look at some of the modern websites, they are more pictures, less text, more icons. And our search engine, you'll see, is not as prominent on this page. And before, we didn't have as good of a search engine. We're trying to improve that in the new redesigned website. So this kind of gives you an idea of the look and feel that we are transitioning to. So we only have 5 tabs at the top, and clearly what our mission is and what the work that we're doing with 60 by 30. You see the search engine much more prominent in the center of the page. And so this just kind of gives you a feel for what that looks like. We soft launched this internally with staff and asked them to complete a survey to provide us with their feedback. We're working on addressing and adjusting some things, and we hope to launch it externally in May.
Are you through with your presentation?
I have a few more slides, but
Okay, go ahead, because it's probably on the website. No, it isn't?
What?
Is your question on the website?
No, well, yes, exactly.
Sure.
Yeah, no, it's, the search engines, so most, Google's making all that money because their search engine is so good. So many times I go to different websites and the search engine just doesn't get there. So what have you done? I mean, have you contracted with somebody that kind of is really good?
do you want to come up, Jen?
Because if the fewer places you have to, I mean, it's better, right? Less clutter, a little bit fewer tabs, but then that makes the search engine that much more important.
Well, the search engine that we use on the new website is called Cluedo. It's a cloud-based search engine mechanism. So it does come with capabilities like you can tag your pages to determine, how the ranking in the search results will look like to the end user. What are the most relevant information you want to present when people key in certain keywords on the search box on the home page?
And so you've tested that, and it works well.
It works, yes.
Good. Okay.
There's still glitches. We're still working on it. I wouldn't say it's 100% perfected, but it's certainly better than what we have now.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Just very quickly, a few other improvements that we've implemented over the last couple of years. One thing that I started doing in 2017.
Ms. Sun, maybe you should stay there, because I'm going to ask some questions about the website after this.
Beginning in 2017, I started monitoring daily the survey responses that we get online, and I get an average about 3 to 5 survey results, and when they have comments, especially if they have contact information, because they do have an ability to leave their name and their email address if they want to be contacted, I will look at that, and then if I can determine which department or division that this applies to, I will send it to the head of that division or department, ask them to follow up accordingly, and let me know what the response was, so that we're monitoring those on a daily basis. We're also monitoring on a monthly basis the craft system, and we're going to be doing a much better job of this moving forward, is making sure that our timeliness of responding to a particular request is within our Compact with Texans standards. So we want to make sure that staff are certainly doing what they need to do in accordance with our compact. IT recently installed what's called the Site Improve software to help us with our websites and identifying broken links, ensuring that we are compliant with accessibility laws at the state and federal level, and just overall improving quality assurance. One of the complaints that we heard from our borrowers was that we weren't accepting Visa payments. And that's because Texas NIC USA, which is the vendor that provides this service for our borrowers under the contract with Texas Department of Information Resources, was not, and now they've given us, we worked with them, and now they've given us that opportunity to take Visa. That's posed its own issues in terms of costs, and Ken can talk to that later in terms of his presentation on the budget. And some of the next steps here, you'll see we will take or are in the process of taking in order to address the concerns that we receive from our customers, improving the online payment process, which would allow borrowers to apply. If they have multiple loans, they can apply their payment towards specific loans, like, say, those that have the highest interest rates. Right now, they don't have the ability to do that on their own. They have to contact us and do that manually. And so calling the call center, that also poses some of its own problems in terms of wait times and so forth. But I think the overall goal of borrower services is to really make our borrowers much more self-sufficient with online tools. And so that, again, is going to require additional IT resources. But just want to conclude that we're not satisfied with the 64% overall satisfaction rating. We certainly want to bring that percentage up, and significantly. We anticipate that the improvements that we've made so far and that are planning to make will have a positive impact on customer satisfaction. One of the things that I want to work on is looking at how we can measure how we're doing in other areas of the agency, since we've got so much feedback on borrower services. I want to see how we're actually doing in other divisions and departments. And so we may look to modify the survey or provide the survey in different ways, except not just through the craft responses. So we are committed to doing better, and that's our goal. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
So I have a question about the website. So that's important because that's kind of how most people see us, right, is the website. You said there's a loan website and an agency website.
Yes, so if you go to our main website, you can, one of those 27 options is student loans, and you click on there, and that'll take you to our Helms system.
But when you were asking the survey question, you said if I visited the website, it was easy to use, well-organized, and contained accurate information. So
31% strongly disagreed and disagreed. So
right. Well, but we don't know whether they were complaining about the
most
loan.
of the complaints were about the loan program website, because you could tell, because they tied it to their payment options and so forth.
That's what I was going to say. So then you got comments, and you got, and when people comment, that's not unusual for a lot of them to be negative, because that's your opportunity. But
Yes.
did you learn more about what they were complaining about? Were they?
Absolutely. And I can tell you, Chad Pulse is here. I mean, he's on it every day. He's got a running list of things that we need to do to improve, but again, we have to prioritize those because of the limited resources.
What would it cost to do what you want to do with that?
I don't think that we have costed it out. Nope. Yeah, Ken's saying no. We've not costed it out, but we can try to.
What do you
come
think?
up
What's a ballpark for, if we were going to ask the legislature? Because this is just my thought. I think it's important enough that maybe we ought to try to figure out, without going to the legislature, a way to really fix this. Like I said, this is how most people view us, is this website. So.
Well, and there's two components to it. There is the loan software website, which we call HelmNet, and that's one of the interfaces borrowers receive when they submit their application, et cetera. And then we have a HH Loans website that gives them a lot of information about the loan program, et cetera, which the agency controls. We have not costed out as far as applying payments differently. That would require system changes, et cetera. We're in the process. We have a long list of items we'd like to attack. The difficulty is number of resources, either within ISS, vendor-related, et cetera, and we have not taken all of those consolidated and provided to ISS or to the vendor to say, how much would it cost? That's why we don't have a complete answer on that. We do have an IT steering committee that when we do have projects that require internal resources within IT, we do meet and present the project and the benefit, et cetera, and any competing projects, because we're competing with IT resources just like any other division within the agency. So those are some of the constraints that we're with. And from a funding standpoint, a lot of this can be performed using loan funds on our side. If it requires our vendor, it may be a little bit different from the IT side, but from our loan vendor, et cetera, part of it becomes headcount, FTE resources within the agency as well, because some of the work that needs to be done when the vendor provides updates to the software, that also needs to be then uploaded and tested, et cetera, and then we have to engage IT resources in those functions as well.
Be a difficult question to answer, but to fix it, how much would it cost, do you think? Just a ballpark?
I really don't know. I mean, that would just be a very, if I just had to guess, maybe 500,000, but, and maybe a couple FTE that would be required on the IT side of the house to be able to continue the additional support, but that is a guess.
Okay, so just to clarify, you're talking about the loan websites, right?
That is correct.
But then, didn't the Texas Higher Education Foundation get a grant from the Gates Foundation to redo our website?
Yes, the 60by30text.com website. And that website
Is that different than the coordinating board website?
Well, it's part of the coordinating board website. So that totally focuses on the higher education strategic plan and the data associated with the plan. So Gates, was as part of the Gates grant, they were interested in funding the messaging of the strategic plan, and so we were able to fit a website. That was a way that we could sort of streamline the data and the information that's totally dedicated to 60 by 30 text. But we have our agency website, which is much more than just 60 by 30. It's all these other things that we do.
But the Gates grant was like $750,000? I mean,
I believe
lost
we
from
spent about 150,000.
Oh, that's it?
On the website.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
Oh, that was just phase 1. So there's phase 2, so that might be about the same.
Okay. All right. Well, it's kind of confusing, but
Yeah, we had asked, in our legislative exceptional item request, I think we had asked for 175,000 to redesign our agency website, and the response that we got from legislators was, why don't you just hire a UT student and they'll do it for you? And so, but we didn't, it's much more difficult than that. You just need to have, you have to have the ability and the knowledge and content and messaging. And I think it's worked fine with the website governance committee that we have. It's not ideal, but it certainly is, I think, better than what we have today. And I'm hoping that we will get some positive feedback when we launch this in May.
Any other questions or comments?
Sorry.
Please.
Go ahead, Dr. Frias.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Battles, I agree that the 64% we need to do better. So I guess my question is, how do we compare to other state agencies? Because obviously this report is required from all agencies and higher institutions, right, of higher education. And it goes to the governor's budget board and the legislative
Right.
board, LBB, right?
Right, right.
So I guess my question is, how do we compare with other agencies? And then, of course, the report has to issue plans and assessments to improve.
Right, and, I have to say that I haven't looked at other state agencies' reports for a couple of years now, so I haven't, but it's sort of comparing apples to oranges because we do such different type of work. I think we're the only state agency that has like a loan program that we administer and have that direct. TxDOT is going to be totally different. Health and Human Services is going to be totally different. TEA even. So it's hard to compare and say we're better or we're less or we're about the same. But I'm happy to look at some of the other reports and see
Yeah,
what
because
they're doing
I think
and
what,
if
you know,
there's some commonalities.
Yeah, because I think what they look at is as far as satisfaction and what they're looking at. And so it doesn't mean you have to have obviously 100%, but we don't want to be everyone else having 80, 85%, and we're at
Sure.
64%. And I'm thinking that the big issues with the concerns with satisfaction are people calling in about student loans, where am I, where I'm not going, and it gets frustrating for them, and that could be a reason why our numbers are not as good as they could be.
Yes.
So, but we're looking to address those issues,
Right.
which is great. We need to do that. So that's kind of where I'm coming from in terms of I see improvements, and we recognize there's an issue, and I just would
Right.
like to see the plan, because obviously that's why those boards want to see this, right?
Right, right. I will look at that and I will let you know. And I'll look at the overall scores and
Okay.
see how we compare.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Good suggestion. Ms. Jones? Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to say I'm really impressed with the website mock-up. I think that's really helpful. It's a little bit hard sometimes to find information on the current website, so I think that's a really helpful first step. I am a little bit concerned, I think, of the things that you discussed in your presentation about the inability to apply payments to a specific loan. That's a pretty standard feature for a lot of other loan websites, and that can cost students, money that.
Absolutely. And we do have a workaround that we do. It's just not terribly efficient. So this is why we want to get that done. That's one of our priorities.
Do students know that, is it listed on the website that they can alter the way that the repayments are made by calling you all, or?
Chad, do you want to come up? I don't know if you have the answer. I do not know that off the top of my head.
One of the challenges that we have that we're working, especially as they've moved to the new contracts with Texas.gov and NICUSA, is that when students make payments, they're actually leaving the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board website and going over to the NICUSA website. So it looks like they're still on our website, but they're not. So that's one of the things that we're working with, and we have a project on our implementation efforts right now that we're targeting for the end of the year to provide more functionality over on that interface so that they can do more direct payments to the specific things on those. So that's one of the challenges, is some of the messaging that we do gets to be a challenge, because by the time they need the message, they're not on our website anymore for us to give them the message. I'll check specifically to kind of see what we have and where in terms of guidance right now that we provide them.
Would making that change, allowing students to determine which loan they repay?
That's one of the goals of the project.
Is that something that doesn't require extra appropriations? You just have to work with the vendor to?
Right. We're utilizing loan funds and project funds and things like that to do it.
Okay.
And let me clarify that our loan program operations are completely self-sufficient. They're through loan repayments and bond sales, so we don't use general revenue. But where the general revenue comes in is on our IT services. You know, we have a limited number of staff to support the entire agency, and that area is supported, you know, half general revenue, half loan program funds. We can't continue to rely on loan program funds to meet the agency's IT needs, because it's, you know, we can use it for indirect costs associated with the loan program, but when we have all these other agency-wide needs, I mean, that really needs to be general revenue focused. And so this is why we want to have an exceptional item to support not only our cybersecurity infrastructure, but also all these other needs that will make, I think, helping us to provide more excellent customer service and other IT needs of the entire agency, not just the loan program.
Why don't, I think Mr. Plank was first.
Yeah, very briefly.
And then Ms.
Yeah.
Acosta, and then maybe we should move on.
Certainly. Did the survey allow for respondents to give you specific recommendations on changes? And if you
Yes,
have,
well,
you all
there's a
considered it all
box.
putting together? My concern is an insular approach to how y'all will do this. When you tend to get in an agency and an agency review, you're not seeing what your customers seeing. So perhaps maybe a customer focus group from some of the more vocal people who offered concrete suggestions would be great to say, run a beta test with them before you release it to the public, give them a chance to vet it, make recommendations, and maybe clarify a few things before it makes it to the public.
That's a great idea. We can do that. Our survey provides a text box that basically asks the survey respondent if there's any suggestions, any comments that you would like to provide. And so it's pretty open-ended. And then they have the opportunity or the option to leave their name or their email and their email address to be contacted so that we could follow up. Those are the ones I like the best, because sometimes we need clarification on where their concerns were, what kind of suggestions they have. We really want to have that conversation with them. A lot of the times they're done anonymously, and so it's a little more difficult, but we listen and we recognize that, well, if 5 anonymous people are saying the same thing, obviously this could be a problem, so it bubbles up to, you know, a higher priority. The other thing I didn't mention is when we do get those positive comments, which are always nice to receive, sometimes people will identify specific employees if they've received excellent customer service. So I will forward those comments to the employee, copy their supervisor along all the way up to their chain of command, and thank them for providing that excellent customer service to hopefully reinforce excellent customer service across all of our employees.
Okay, Ms. Acosta, that's a great suggestion.
I just had a really quick question, Linda. Would you update us? Are we looking at, and talking about the closures that we've had, throughout the state and us taking on the transcripts and all those other ancillary things that come with that. Is that going to be a part of our new effort on this website, or some IT component that if you were at X university and it closed and you just want your transcript?
Right.
Are y'all thinking
We're-
around that?
Yes,
space for the-
absolutely. So we'll have on our redesigned website a link where students can go to find their transcripts. We're going to have a database, and Jen, you may want to elaborate.
So currently, we're working on phase 1 of that project, so we're getting a hard copy, paper copy from the universities or institution that's already closed with all the student transcripts. So we're scanning and loading all these information in our back-end system. So in the future, we're going to have a portal for students, to go online to request a copy of their transcripts online, so, yeah.
I think maybe we ought to move on, but when will we have the redesigned website?
Actually, we included the link in your board newsletter if you wanted to take a look at it.
But when will it be implemented?
We are looking to launch it externally in May. I don't have a definitive date yet because it will depend on whether or not we are able to fix all the glitches.
In any case, by the next board meeting, it'll be in operation. Okay.
Absolutely.
It's all right, we'll move on, but we need a motion on this.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. We need approval. So my question is, for Ms. Battles, give me a little history really quick on, is it because of Texas Government Code that we have to accept the report or do recommendations?
Yes. So, it requires the board to submit the report. So we typically do, because there's a statutory requirement, we'll bring it to the board. But it's part of our agency strategic planning process as well. So it becomes an appendix in that agency strategic plan. You should have received a notice that we're going to have a special called board meeting to take that agency strategic plan and adopt it. So this report, because of the timing, it's due by June 1. You're not going to meet until after June 1, so it's not part of the agency strategic plan. That would have been ideal to have it part of that, but we only asked for an extension on the plan itself, so that's why you're taking action of it today.
So moved.
So move. Okay, Dr. Farias. Ms. Plank, you're going to have to second it, I think.
I made a motion. Yes, sir.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Yeah, for people watching this, well, it probably is worth explaining that we've got 2 ex officio members here today, and then, of course, Ms. Acosta, but really only 3 committee members. Since I'm chairing, either you have to make the motion and second, or Mr. Plank does. So I don't want people to think you're just dominating the meeting. That's the reason. Okay, so report on grants and contracts, including those exceeding $1 million. Mr. Franz. And this is one, we've been provided this list in advance.
Yes, sir.
And if
happy
you all
to
want
answer
to
any
take a moment
questions.
to look at it, what we usually do is if anybody if anybody has a question, this would be the time to ask it. No questions, okay? Anybody? All right, the next item under agency operations is an update on the key initiatives recommended by NTT Data regarding the agency cybersecurity framework. This does not require any action. Ms. Jinjin Sun, Assistant Commissioner for Information Solutions and Services, and Mr. John House, Information Security Officer, will update the committee on the progress made on implementing the key initiatives recommended by NTT Data.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. To begin our presentation, I'm going to give a brief introduction to the Texas Cybersecurity Framework and share the results from the assessment conducted by NTT Data on our agency cybersecurity infrastructure back in 2017.
So can I ask a preliminary question? So some of this we've discussed in executive session, which we're allowed to do, and so maybe explain why we're able to, we're not going to get anything particularly sensitive today? Is that?
That's correct.
This is just going to give everybody a general update on the progress we've made so far. So then, after I cover the first two topics, I'm going to invite my colleague, Mr. John House, Agency Information Security Officer, to review the high-level implementation roadmap and talk about the progress we've made ever since the last AOC meeting, and discuss the activities planned for the remaining month of this fiscal year. So in response to Senate Bill 1134, Texas Department of Information Resources created the Texas Cybersecurity Framework for the state agencies to follow to protect the state cyber infrastructure. Between April and June 2017, NTT Data, a DIR contracted vendor, assessed our agency's cybersecurity infrastructure according to the framework and shared their findings and key recommendations in a special called board meeting in June 2017. To summarize, THECB received scores higher than the state agency average in 34 out of the 40 objectives as outlined in the Texas Cybersecurity Framework. We received scores equal to the state agency average in 3 objectives, and there are 3 areas we received scores lower than state agency average, and they are security awareness and training, identification and authentication, and cybersecurity incident response. So during the assessment, NTT used the Cybersecurity Control Objective Maturity Indicator to assess each one of the 40 objectives implemented at our agency. The term maturity relates to the degree of formality and optimization of processes and procedures implemented in our agency. So a score of 3 indicates that we have standard process and procedures put into place, and the roles and the responsibilities of the staff are well-defined and documented. Level 2 indicates area for improvement in terms of documenting knowledge and best practices, institutionalizing processes, and changing our agency culture to become more proactive. Your turn.
Yes, back in June, NTT provided a roadmap of key initiatives to complete. And NTT also provided suggested timelines. We made a few changes to align it with our capabilities and kind of align it with some of the work we're already doing. So you see here, the solid blue kind of indicates where we're at right now, and the green is some effort that's still required. Some of these took a lot of effort, particularly the policy and procedure, role-based training. We did role-based training throughout the agency, and we believe we can complete these by the end of the fiscal year. And next slide, please. So these are some of the progress we've made since the last time we met. One of the bigger items here is on data loss prevention. We've made progress. We've implemented some additional controls in Office 365. That lets us monitor confidential information that people may be sending an email, and it provides a lot of awareness as staff encounter the control. We completed our risk assessment work. We presented to management, and it's important to note that the risk assessment was modified to meet NTT Data's requirements. And we've got a good handle on our cloud-based resources because the risk assessment helped us compile an inventory of cloud-based resources. We've done a lot of work on policies and procedures, and we completed reviews in December, and the revised policies are pending approval. One of the things we're real excited about is managed security services, and DIR finalized their managed security services recently, so we've ordered some of the managed security services offerings, and these are going to help us improve security and help us on our NTT Data initiatives. Next slide. This shows the 16 that we were at a level 2 back in June, and it shows progress. Like I say, there's 40 of these controls, and these are the 16 that we were at 2. You see some of the ones that we still need work on. We still need to do some enterprise architecture work and security configuration hardening. We'll be working on some initiatives to complete system documentation on our security configuration hardening standards. And also additional work on data loss prevention. We'll be doing some training in the fourth quarter on data loss prevention. Initiatives planned for quarter 3, quarter 4. For configuration hardening, we'll be completing system security plans, and this will, there are about a dozen systems that were indicated in the risk assessment that we'll be completing these plans on, and it demonstrates our security controls for those systems and provides documentation for audit and things like that want to review security of systems. For critical applications, for the system development lifecycle, we'll be doing some security checklists for developers, and we'll be putting some of the resources for managed security services to work. We'll be implementing vulnerability management solution, and this vulnerability management solution will help us test our internal systems for security to make sure they meet security standards. Also, this vulnerability management will help us improve our application security because we can use the managed security services tool to scan our agency applications and agency websites. Also in managed security services, we've ordered a web application firewall, and this will help harden our web applications. We're currently using an open source web application firewall, and this will provide additional capabilities. And the final piece from managed security services was we've ordered a security incident and event management solution, and this will provide 24/7 monitoring of some of our security infrastructure. To wrap things up, we'll be doing more role-based training on data loss prevention, and we're providing links to all of our role-based training so employees can complete the training. New employees and things like that can take role-based training. It's already been presented. And there's still a little bit of work to do on policy and procedure, and we've been waiting for some staffing to complete this work on enterprise architecture strategy. So thank you, and are there any questions?
Good. Well, thank you. It sounds like you've been doing a lot of work on this. I guess what I'd ask Ms. Battles, how do you feel about our progress, and do you have any particular concerns?
I feel really good about our progress. I think John and his team have done, and Jen have done a great job in being laser focused on getting these things done, and I want to commend them for their hard work to this point, and I see light at the end of the tunnel because we're getting close to the finish. There are obviously always going to be some continuing, ongoing things that we have to do associated with this, which is good. But I feel very, very good about the progress that we've made to date.
Yeah, and we understand that there's going to be internal audit of this work, and it's important to note that the agency security plan has to be submitted in October on even number years, and it's a self-assessment that covers these same 40 control areas. And so, you know, if we hit the mark on NTT's recommendations, we should look real good in our agency security plan this year.
Good. Thank you for your good work on this.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioner, welcome. Where have you been? At the Capitol?
Well, I have proof of where I was. We were testifying.
Can you give us a few minutes on it?
Sure. We gave an overview of 60 by 30 Texas, and the toughest questions came from Senator West, who's very disappointed, as he has every right to be, about the numbers for African American students and Latino students, particularly males. And he asked why we hadn't made any progress or significant progress. I told him that we had made substantial progress in the past couple of years, but not much in relation to the size of the challenge. And he charged me and Commissioner Morath from TEA and Chairman Alcantar from the Texas Workforce Commission to come to his office in Dallas in 2 or 3 weeks and make a report about what we propose to recommend to get much better results than we're currently getting. And he was agitated, and some of his colleagues seconded what he said, not quite as vehemently, but he's right. And so we have to do a lot better. I met with him privately after our particular panel, and he said, "What do you think we can do that would make the biggest difference?" I said, "Past outcomes-based funding for universities with the bonus for graduations, particularly of at-risk students." I told him some of the other things we were doing, like Advise Texas and Grad Texas. I told him they had great promise and we were making progress, but he wants significantly more progress than we're getting right now. Can't say I blame him.
Thank you. So the next item on the agenda, it's actually the last item under agency operations. It's a consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to amendments to Chapter 1, Subchapter E, Sections 1.114 and 1.115 concerning the student complaint procedure. Mr. Bill France, General Counsel, will present this to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Steen. I'd like to point out that we don't have a quorum at this point, and I think that we need to await a quorum before we can take any action on this item.
All right. Let's look for something where we don't. Should we just take a break until Dr. Frias gets back, or what do y'all think? I'm
We
wondering.
can go to the next non-item, right? Non-action item, which is agenda item 5B.
Which one is
That would be
that?
Ken Martin.
Okay, so this is this the, it's under finance, and an update to the committee regarding the issuance. Is this what this is?
Yes.
Regarding the issuance of an RFQ and the resulting selection and award of bond counsel to perform legal services for the agency related to the student loan bond program. This item does not require any action. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. This item, as you know, in October, the board approved the issuance of an RFP for legal counsel to support our bond program and the student loan program. And I'm here to just provide a brief update of the result of that RFP. And as you know, and for new members, the board utilizes bond counsel in support of the Hinson Hayeswood student loan program. The legal counsel assists board staff with complex legal issues concerning the issuance of bonds, statutory, federal tax code, et cetera. And the current vendor's contract will expire at the end of this fiscal year, which is August 31st, 2018. An RFQ was issued by the purchasing team within the Office of General Counsel in January 2018. The RFQ was sent to 144 vendors, of which 104 were historically underutilized businesses or hubs listed in the state Texas Centralized Master Bidders List. The CMBL is an electronic mail list administered by the comptroller, which has a database of vendors registered by commodity codes who have provided contact information, commodity codes, and the goods and services that they provide. A separate invitation was sent to 5 industry leaders separately from the coordinating board. A description of the solicitation was also posted on the Texas Register. The solicitation and documents were also posted on the agency's website. The agency received 3 qualified proposals, and purchasing followed the Gov't Code. In the selection, we had a panel of 3 members from agency staff that was formed to evaluate the proposals. The panel consisted of General Counsel, myself, and Director of Financial Reporting. The Director of Purchasing facilitated the panel through the process throughout the selection of the vendor and the evaluation. The vendor responses were evaluated and scored based on the following criteria: qualifications and experience, and fair and reasonable price. The selected vendor that scored the highest in the evaluation was McCall, Parkhurst, and Horton. And in accordance with Texas Administrative Code Rule 1.16, approval was sought by board chair, vice chair, and committee chair and was received for the selection of that vendor. And I'm happy to answer any questions on that. This does not require approval. Thank you. Similar to bond counsel, we also engage with a financial advisor for the assistance in the issuance of bonds and the administration of the loan program. The current contract with our current financial advisor expires 8/31/2018. Similar to bond counsel, we issued an RFP, of which the board approved the issuance at the October meeting. The RFP was issued by the purchasing team, and this was sent to 78 vendors, of which 53 were historically underutilized businesses listed in the same database. A separate invitation was sent to 7 industry leaders that were identified by the agency. A description of the solicitation was also posted to the Texas Register. Documents were also posted to the agency website, and the agency received 3 qualified proposals. Similar, we had a panel of 3 members, and the same individuals. The items were evaluated on qualifications and experience, fees and costs, an overview of the firm, and other relevant factors. The selected vendor that scored the highest was Hilltop Securities, Inc., and they will subcontract with Yakari Consultants, which is a hub firm, for 20% of the business. And again, in accordance with Texas Administrative Code Rule 1.16, board chair, vice chair, and AOC chair approval was sought and received for the selection of this item. I'm happy to answer any questions. It does not require approval.
Any questions or comments? All right, do you want to return to the regular order? So let's go back to, this is, was it, it's the last item under agency operations, consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to amendments to Chapter 1, Subchapter E, Sections 1.114 and 1.115 concerning the student complaint procedure. Mr. Franz.
Thank you, sir. These amendments, as proposed, they're very simple amendments. They'll update the division name in the student complaint procedure, the mailing address, that removes language prohibiting the agency from accepting fax transmissions of student complaint forms, and it clarifies the student complaint procedures. So the sum and substance of what these amendments do.
Do I have a motion to approve the amendments to the rules concerning the student complaint procedure?
So moved.
By Mr. Plank.
Second.
Dr. Farias. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. The first item under finance is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to the agency's operating budget for fiscal year 2019. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. This is for fiscal year 19, which starts September 1st, 2018. This is for the second year of the current biennium. And the agency is committed to transparency, to fully inform the board about agency activities. We want to ensure full board involvement, knowledge of how funding is being utilized. We've had the financial report, which I provide to you each quarter, which will be the next agenda item, that allows you to see how funds are being spent and within what programs. Brings awareness to important activities that the board performs, and you're also involved in legislative appropriation request process, et cetera. So we have a lot of dialogue throughout those processes. Within your materials, you do have the detailed budget before you to be able to look at. if you have any questions. We'll go through a couple budgetary fundamentals. So backing this up a little bit, how do we get to the agency's budget here? And then, as I mentioned in a meeting previously, then the subsequent item is actually reporting on our budget each quarter before the board. How are we spending the funding, et cetera? So we start with a base budget, and the state starts with level funding. So if you use the 2021 fiscal year as an example, we'll start with 18-19 funding that they provide for general revenue and general revenue dedicated. That'll become our base or level funding of this biennium into next. And then any items that we want above that are called exceptional items. They can impose reductions within the session, et cetera. We have the, once the legislature meets and all the committees and all the funding's provided, supplemental materials, supplemental appropriations come through, we have the General Appropriations Act, or the GAA. That will be for biennium for 2 years, and we are in the current biennium of the 18-19 biennium. The LAR will have in July will be for the 2021 biennium. The agency's budget is based on each individual year, and what we do, we could budget the entire biennium both years up front, but we decide not to do that because we want to be able to be nimble and be able to make adjustments and reprioritize if need be within each year. So we brought in July meeting of 17, brought before you the 2018 fiscal year budget, and now we're bringing before the 19, and that allows us to take as the most relevant information we have of what's going to occur, what is occurring, and apply that to this budget cycle. And then, as I mentioned, you have the quarterly financial report that you receive, and I'll report on in a little bit with another agenda item that gives you the update of how we're progressing within that approved budget. A couple items to note here. Even though we're a medium-sized agency, we really are a complex agency. Our methods of finance, and a method of finance is where did the money come from? So if I was a corporation, it's a dollar. But here it becomes general revenue, tax revenue, general revenue dedicated, so that could be money from various different funding sources, tuition set-asides, et cetera, but it's dedicated for a specific purpose, can't be spent outside that. Obviously, federal revenue. We get donated funds, so we have the foundation, and we have other means outside of that to receive funds through gifts, grants, or other donations for specific projects. Gates is one of those foundations we've received funding for, as well as others. And then we have the loan funds. So you've heard previously in other testimony, Ms. Battle's customer service report, that we have loan funds that provide support for the loan program. Since that program is generated through the issuance of bonds, or stipulation on those bonds in the covenants that those funds can only be used for support of the program. So we can't use those for IT to build a website for data that isn't related to the loan program itself. And so those are some of the items that we run into. The agency utilizes all of these funding sources. We want to make sure we're not 100% reliant on any one of those particular funding sources. And within the budget structure in the GAA, we have what are called strategies, or specific programs or administrative strategies, are broken into 9 goals. So you have a goal, and then within a goal, you'll have the strategies or a subset of those goals. And we have goal A through I. A and B are our operating, so the types of strategies we have 2 goals, A and B, and those are our operating strategies. We break those out by direct. So direct is individuals who are performing programmatic functions. I'll give you an example. I have the student financial aid services direct strategy. They support Texas grant, tuition equalization grants, et cetera, all of the grant programs that they perform, as well as there's also a strategy for the loan program, and then in the direct. So they're direct administration of the loan program. Indirect would be items such as my team for finance and IT and general counsel, commissioner's office, Ms. Battle's office, et cetera. Those are indirect. We're not directly supporting the program, so we're supporting the agency overall in its mission. This budget does align with the GAA, and with both in funding sources and headcount. As you know, we're limited on funding, and we're also limited on FTE. They're specifically stipulated the quantity or the max amount that we have when we report to the SAO each quarter, the amount of FTEs that we actually have as well. And it prioritizes limited funding by focusing on key initiatives. One of the items that we felt was key, as we discussed earlier, was, when we look at retention of staff, we're also, you look back and at the recession, or soon after the recession, the unemployment rate was in the double digits. And now, within Texas and potentially nationally, we're below 4%, which is 4% and above is considered full employment. It is becoming a very difficult environment for hiring, and especially hiring talented staff. As you know, the state just in general has a difficult time competing with the private sector. It's even more difficult when you get into this constrained environment. So what we did is we instituted a 2% cost of living equity adjustment for all eligible staff starting in March of this year. And what we felt we needed to do this was in retention of staff. Last time the state funded something like this was in over 2 biennium ago. So there was not in the last appropriation for the biennium or this biennium any type of cost of living. And the example I have at the bottom is really, you look at it, if you average 2% inflation over 3 years, somebody's lost the purchasing power of 6% on their salary. And we have some people making, state average salary here. That becomes a very difficult environment for them as they've seen fuel or food costs go up, cost of living, et cetera.
Mr. Chairman, may I make just some comments before Ken continues? One of the things that all state agencies do is they issue a survey of employee engagement, and that is administered by the University of Texas at Austin. And the survey results that we received from this most recent survey earlier this year indicated that the number one concern of our employees is the pay. And so we really looked at that and started to, we'd been looking at the lack of salary increases across the board for state employees and how long that had been, and even looking at 2013 and 2014 when the state did provide a state increase. If you looked at before that time, there was a huge gap. So we've been falling further and further behind, and it has been, as Ken mentioned, very difficult to recruit and retain talented staff. And so it, again, is in alignment with our overall goal of recruiting and retaining skilled and knowledgeable staff to provide that excellent customer service. We felt that this was an important thing to do. So I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that we do also survey our own staff to find out where the problem areas are, what's working, what's not working, and we tried to respond appropriately.
Just a high-level overview of some of the changes within the budget. Within our operating, as I mentioned, we had our direct and indirect operating. One of the larger changes, Ms. Battles mentioned, with our acceptance of Visa was the additional fees that is associated with that. And we did have the loan program increase about $450,000 we added in the budget for next year because we're seeing a high adoption rate for credit card, specifically Visa. We had credit cards previously, I believe MasterCard, Discover, and with Visa being the number one, that really increased the volume. And what we're looking at potentially is how do we, in the future, pass on or charge some of that fee back to the borrower. So sometimes if you were to go to your county or some, maybe the DMV, I may have this wrong, but in some areas that you go make a payment, they will charge you, say, 2% of that transaction cost because that's what they're getting from the credit card company. We have the same. It's 2.25% that we get for credit card transactions. And right now, we're bearing the full cost of that, and it's becoming very burdensome. It's good to have the potential for credit card, but we don't want borrowers to become reliant on just shifting debt, and we have no visibility to be able to tell whether they're doing that or not. But we want to make sure we provide a balance, too, as well.
Martin, how do you change that?
Well, we work with a vendor, and Ms. Battles mentioned NICUSA. They are a DIR contracted vendor that we're required to use. It provides the credit card processing transactions, and they're linked with the comptroller with the movement of funding. We work with them. So right now our team, Dr. Pols and his team, are evaluating potential options, and then which one we want to come forward to recommend to the commissioner, and then we'll work with our IT department and our vendor it'll take some file modifications, et cetera, obviously, and then a messaging plan, because borrowers are used to one way. We want to make sure we fully message to borrowers.
But with the idea that you tell the borrower you can pay by credit card, but you're going to have to pay this extra percentage?
That is the potential, correct, if that's what we adopt.
And we can adopt that as a board?
I do not believe it actually requires even board approval. It's something we would go before the commissioner to have him approve. The other item, the COLA that we just mentioned, and we did add a little bit of IT support, and then what's below that is the teacher quality program. This was a federal program you'll see in operating and trustee programs as an adjustment. The federal funding for that ended, so this fiscal year, 2018, is the last year of that program. So staff are in the process of being reassigned, and funding will be eliminated for 2019. So that has been zeroed out. Of note, our operating funds to trustee ratio, one of the items we try to look at from a metric is, out of all the trustee funds that we receive and the total dollars that we're proposing for operating, where are we from a percentage standpoint, and how do we trend? And we were 1.41% in 2018, or 1.45% in 2019, so fairly close. And within the trustee programs, as I mentioned, the teacher quality program, we also have the joint admissions medical program. This program is set up within the General Appropriations Act as it's funded 100% in the full year, and then it has carry forward in the second year. So in our budget, we have zero. We don't have an estimation yet of what, if any, of those will carry forward. So the program's fully funded. It's just fully funded in 1 year, of which, depending on how it plays out, they could utilize some of those funds in the second year. But from this budget that we submitted, we're assuming zero at this point. And then the Be On Time loan program, as you know and have heard for, I think, a couple years now, that program was being phased out, and so each year it's only funding renewal students. So as renewal students become less and less, the funding needs decline as well. And so that was about a $35.9 million year-over-year decline. And then we have community college funding. So the agency receives the appropriation for community colleges and also administers those funding and pays those out to the community colleges. And that was about a $4.5 million year-over-year reduction. As we've discussed, the loan program is about $1.5 billion. We have the college access loan, we have the Be On Time loan, and the Texas Armed Services Scholarship loan programs. Those are the three active loan programs. We still do service loans from previous programs that were phased out, but the loans are still in existence and required to be serviced until those loans are paid off. And as we've discussed previously, the program is fully supported financially. It does not require general revenue, nor has it in the past. And we use about $13.1 million that we've built into this budget here for 19 of those funds. And we perform a cash flow analysis with our financial advisor to determine that, looking at cash flow, obviously, do we have enough to sustain the operation, et cetera, and we do. And I am happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments?
I have a comment. As a small business owner for 30 years and dealing with credit cards, I mean, the question becomes, this is my legal question probably for Mr. Franz, but there are some agreements where you cannot charge a customer the 2.5 or 4%. One of the companies I know has that you did not mention that the coordinating board takes, but obviously we'll check all that out to make sure, obviously, because the contracts that we need to get into, we need to be very careful about that.
And we definitely will. We work with the Department of Information Resources. They are they perform have the master service agreement with Texas.gov and NIC USA. And then again, NIC USA works with the comptroller from the funds movement, transaction processing files. We'll make sure that is. We want to come up with a recommendation. We're evaluating a couple options. One is passing the fee. That's probably the higher one right now that we're looking at. You could do a flat fee, but the problem is, what if they have a $50 payment and somebody else has a $10,000 payment they want to pay off their loan? And that's what we're seeing. Sometimes we see a $5,000 credit card transaction. And that could be, I hope, somebody paying off their loan, and then maybe they just want some points or cashback points or something like that. That'd be probably the good situation, not from the fee perspective, but I hope they're not transferring from a lower cost interest rate loan to a higher cost credit card. But we have no visibility. We have no way to know when those are being performed. But at least from financial stability of the program, we do need to evaluate some type of, if not full recovery of these fees, some type of recovery of the fees, because they are becoming substantial. And we've seen a movement. We provide, you can send us in a check, you can provide automatic draft from your bank account, you can do ACH, which is similar, you can do automated ACH, so every month we just automatically draft your account. Well, we've seen some movement from the ACH to credit card. And again, we don't know why, but ACH costs us 25 cents, and the credit card costs us 25 cents plus 2.25%.
Mark, what was the $450,000 that you mentioned? What is that again? You said
that is the transaction fee. So we're projecting $900,000 for fiscal year 19 total transaction.
Just based on the accepting Visa?
That is correct.
So,
as we see the volume going up and we see a shift from ACH to credit card.
Yeah, I know, in private business, if they saw an issue like this, they'd get on it pretty quickly. If you're going to go ahead and do something, you should do it right away.
Well,
in terms of implementing a policy to pass the fee to the borrower.
Right.
So we, if I may interject, we sort of balance obviously we know 60 by 30 is trying to maintain the student debt to no more than 60% of first year wages. So when we have these kind of policy changes, we want to look at, what's going to be the impact on individual students, because we are certainly sensitive to that. But that's something that we've got to look at and see what the pros and cons are before we make a recommendation to the commissioner. The other thing I wanted to mention was some good news is for the College Access Loan Program, we're able to reduce our interest rate from 6.6% to 5.3%. And that will be effective May 14th. So again, we constantly try and adjust and do what we can to ensure that we are helping our borrowers keep their student loan debt down.
Hasn't our lowest been in the? I'm sorry. Haven't our lowest been around the
4.5%?
Yeah.
We had for 3 years.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Chairman Steen on this. I think, choosing to use a credit card is a convenience payment. And I can't think of many of those that I process today. We actually we take advantage of as much, if you will, credit card payment processing in our companies as we possibly can. However, we will not pay with a credit card any of them that have a processing fee. So otherwise, we're able to garner all the benefits from the credit cards by using them. And we'll use significant payments every year with credit card. However, we recognize there's a punitive cost associated with those who say you have an attached fee to pay if you choose. They call it a convenience fee. The convenience fee is if you choose to conveniently use your credit card, you'll conveniently pay for the benefit. And I'd like to see us do the same as quickly as we could. So I know that helping students in that regard, the answer is you can either choose to write a check or you can choose to have a convenience fee that costs the state and they need to pay for it. So that's just my own personal feelings.
And we completely agree. And the item there is one of the items that we're evaluating. Our preference is a move to ACH because it's an automated process. It comes in, goes through, doesn't have to go through lockbox, be handled by somebody to key enter, eliminates any manual entry. One of the items we're looking at that we wanted to implement at the same time, we can disconnect, was a 25 basis points, so a 0.25% reduction in interest rate for people that go to automated ACH, and try and incentivize at the same time a shift to ACH and provide messaging of both changes at the same time.
I was just going to add, that's what some private loan companies are doing now, ACH.
Right. Absolutely.
I just wanted to say that I think this agency has done a terrific job of holding down the cost of administering the program. And what we do is we look for every opportunity to keep interest rates as low as possible. We always put the student first, and I wanted to say publicly, Ken's done a great job in overseeing this program and looking for the best deal for students. And I don't know of a better loan program that's conducted at the state level anywhere that's better than ours. And so,
well, thank you.
important to
And
know.
we have a great support team. I have a lot of knowledgeable individuals, Dr. Pulse and Mr. Wren Harper and many others within the team that are very, very knowledgeable and help us maintain that, as well as my finance team as well, Glenn Osher and Mataka Bush, and worked hard, working with financial advisors, et cetera, to go through. One of the items that I will mention, and I'll get my plug in here, is we're working to make a statutory recommendation, a change for a statutory recommendation. So I came to the board, I believe about a year ago, saying that we could save about $3 to $4 or $5 million annually in bond interest costs by making a software change and then a statutory change. We have the software change in the loan program that's made. That helps us a little bit and alleviates some of the issue, but part of the issue is we're limited by statute of when we can request bonds and then how quickly we have to issue those bonds. I'll give you an example. In statute, we can only, the maximum amount we can request is $75 million. Probably 10 years ago, that would have been sufficient. Program was running around $75 million a year on loan disbursements. We're around $170 million a year on loan disbursements, so it's increased significantly. Part of the item was the programming within the loan system. It would assign the funding source at the time of the loan request, not at the time of disbursement. We have students very quickly will start requesting loans for next year, which is fine. I love the fact that they're proactive and so on. But the system would then need the funding source, which means we needed to have money in our account here in May when the disbursement's going to occur in September. So we have that program change, but now we need the statute change, because right now the only way we can get above $75 million in bonding authority is on August 15th, there is what's called a collapse, but any unused bonding authority statewide across all for private activity bonds is now free and available. It gets collapsed and taken away from everybody, and then we have to go into that source and try and become first come, first serve. In the past, it worked for the agency. About the time I came into this role, that source started becoming highly utilized and sought after because of housing authorities. As we know, Texas housing is running very briskly, and so we'd see housing authorities being able to utilize these bonds for that activity. Last year, I think within a week after the 15th, $1.8 million was fully assigned. Now, we got in the window, and we're able to get $200 million of authority. We only have 6 months to then spend that. We have to issue the bonds within 6 months after that authority. Otherwise, we lose that authority and we wouldn't be able to issue those bonds. So that means we have to sell. If I go in August, which we will, and we'll have a resolution to the full board in July here, we will have to sell sometime late January, early February. But if we can eliminate that, that means we can push out our actual bond sales to June and July, and that'll save another $3 million of interest payment right there. So that's what we're working on. We're going to cross our fingers we can get that legislative change. But for this 19 year, fiscal year 19, we'll still have to operate under the old method, where we'll save a little bit because of the software change, but we're going to cross our fingers that we can get that change. And then in fiscal year 2020, we'll be able to push our bond sales into June.
Thank you. Great work on that. Any other questions about the budget?
Just a quick comment on the bond firm that we see maybe once a year, right, that comes in. How's the communication with them when we don't see them?
Very good. I'll give you an example. When we had non-bond sale related, when we had the potential that the federal government was making the tax code changes, and there are many different, the House, the Senate, many different forms of changes that could have impacted the private activity bonds, we had, from our financial advisor and our bond counsel, a lot of communication. So they have a lot of individuals that are tied into those types of things and able to get information much quicker than we would here at the agency of the potential pending changes that could have come about. And as you know, we pushed the bond sale to December versus the end of January because we were at risk of the private activity bond losing the tax exemption capability, and we would have had to start all over and go with a completely different route of trying to get funding.
Thank you.
Good. How about a motion to approve the agency's operating budget for fiscal year 2019?
So moved.
Dr. Farias, second by Mr. Plank. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Thank you, sir.
I think that's, actually, you've got one more item.
One more item.
The last item under finance is review of the fiscal year-to-date 2018 financial report to the board, and this is an item that does not require any action. Mr. Martin.
Thank you. I'll be brief on this item because I have spoke a lot about our financials, our information, and in a previous meeting, I went through and detailed the financial report page by page, summary level of the information each page contains, et cetera. I will note this is for the first half of the biennium, so it's through February 28th of 2018. I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't have any specific highlights since we're about halfway through the year and contracts are still being developed, et cetera. You can see on the second page, page 1 of 12, where it just provides a pie chart and it shows you in blue how much we've either expended, encumbered, or have projected to be spent, and then how much is still available in budget. And on our trustee side, you can see we only have 7% left of our entire budget to be expended or be encumbered, locked up for these. So we're on track, and this is the second year of the biennium, so most of the programs, not all, but most, do have carry forward authority. So if a program needed to move carry money into the next fiscal year, most programs have that capability. It's not a use it or lose it. At the end of 2019, next fiscal year, it will be that case, that the money will lapse if you do not expend it or encumber it.
Ms. Jones, a question?
Sure. I wanted to ask about the defaulted loan collections again. And this may be a question for, I know we will have a presentation from KPMG later, but since the last meeting, there was an article that came out regarding actions taken, including by the coordinating board, in terms of suspending occupational licenses as a punitive measure for people who are in default on their student loans. So I wanted to ask if you happen to have any data about the frequency of that happening, if that was something that OAG did, if that's something I should ask the people who are coming up here in a minute. I would like a little bit more information, if that's all right.
Sure. I don't think KPMG will have information on that, but I can provide a little background. There are authorities, so I apologize, it's going to be a little bit of a long answer, but there's a coordinating board that issues loans. We're a state entity. We issue state loans under statute. There is also statute in the Education Code, Chapter 53. We operate under Chapter 52. Chapter 53 was created for authorities, and there were 4 main authorities that were enabled throughout the state to issue federal loans. Back before 2010, the federal government would allow many different entities to issue federal loans, and that changed with a change in bill where the federal government only allowed certain providers to issue federal loans throughout the country, very limited number. But those authorities, one of them was Texas Guaranteed Student Loan Corporation. Texas Guaranteed, TGSLC, I'll call it because that's a long name, was a corporation actually under the comptroller. So the comptroller owned that corporation, and TGSLC was a guarantor for federal loans. They had in statute the ability to do some of these with the licenses, withhold license, et cetera. We did not and do not. I believe in the 83rd session and maybe some prior, the agency did ask for that similar authority. But we did not this last session, nor are we this forward session, et cetera. We do not believe that that is a direction we want to go. We are the coordinating board. We do want people to graduate, and we want to make sure we balance that with our borrowers as well.
Do you happen to know, I'm just wondering, I guess, if you're in default, I know that you have to go through a set number of stages and warning levels and so on. By the time that people get to the point where an occupational license might be suspended, I mean, how... Do you happen to know for other entities how frequently?
Let me give you an example. At least I can tell you how we operate, and that'll give you an idea. It's going to be fairly similar throughout other entities as well. So you have a loan with us, you have a payment due today. 30 days from now, if you don't make that payment, you would be delinquent. So there's a difference between, I'll delineate delinquency and default. Delinquency is 0 to 100 days, or 180 days, excuse me. So almost 6 months. So within that first 6 months, you're delinquent. We here at the agency will send you notices, try and contact you. Is there an issue? Do you need forbearance? Some individuals say, hey, I just lost my job. I'm going to get another job, but maybe it's 2 months from now, what have you, a month and a half. We can work with them and put them at what's called forbearance. So the interest will still accrue, but you don't have to make payments, and you're not delinquent within your account. So you won't go into the next stage, which is default. So after 180 days, you will go into what's called default. At that point, that is for us the delineation between where the coordinating board is servicing that loan and the OAG. Now, since we're state, we have the coordinating board and OAG, most entities, they do both efforts in-house. I worked for a mortgage lender for a short time, and they had different areas, and they had a collection area. But the OAG will then continue to pursue and work with the individual to try and find out what they can do. Is there a repayment plan? Do we need a modified payment plan, income-based, et cetera? We'll do whatever we can within reason to at least allow them to get to pay, because interest is accruing, the clock's ticking, and at least anything they can start paying on that loan is better than nothing. And then it keeps them out of any further stages. So if we get them to an income-based plan, then we'll get them on that, and that'll be their new payment plan for whatever time period that's agreed upon between us. If they continue not to make payments, some will continue to avoid phone calls, all contact, et cetera. Probably within about another 6 months, and it's not definitive because it just depends on the type and the case and circumstances. Which is about a year, the Office of Attorney General will start to seek a judgment on it, on the individual. So as you can see, that's about a 1 year time frame for somebody, and we really, I can't stress it enough, this agency, I can't speak for the other service providers, and there are ones that you will hear in the news about what they do. But for us, we do try and work with the borrower. It's important for us that we try and get them, current, get them to make payments, work with them based on their circumstances. We do issue forbearance, deferments, within reason, but we also have to balance that, because if I'm just kicking the can, I'm accruing interest, my problem becomes bigger, and we want to balance that and make sure that the borrowers know that when we're working through them, because I'm making less payments today on a house per se. Well, you need to make that up at some point in time. And so are you really bettering yourself, down the line? But we'll have those discussions, the coaching, et cetera, to try and make sure they're making an informed decision through the process.
All right, so that was no action on that.
No action.
Thank you for your reports, Mr. Martin. The first item under internal audit is discussion of statements on auditing standards number 114, the auditor's communication with those charged with governance. This item does not require any action. And Mr. David Harwood with KPMG LLP will present this item to the committee. Is that correct, Mr. Harwood? Yes. Okay. And you've got with you, and of course I recognize Ms. Warren, yes, and who else is with you today?
Our manager on the audit is Ms. Shannon Cannels, so she's here because she does a lot of the work, so. But yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman and the board for having us here to present our audit plan. This is for, we have a presentation, which I'm not sure if you guys have up right now, but we'll try to find it, but this is for the August 31st, 2017 audit that we are now currently doing the audit work for in the field these next few weeks. So on slide 2 is what we have is our client service team, and I'll keep this very high level, but please stop me from going too fast if you have any questions. So I already introduced ourselves, so if you go to the next slide, which is where we really spend most of our time on this presentation, is our risk assessment. So the first is kind of what we would call a deem as significant risk relates to management override of controls. This is a risk inherent in every single audit, whether you're a very large multi-billion-dollar public company or you're a very small entity, you will have a significant risk over management override across the board. And what this really is talking about is where we spend a lot of our time. We're required to perform certain procedures to search for fraud, and most of that is going to be in our work that we do over journal entries, as well as having various fraud inquiries throughout the organization. Another item relates to what we see as a significant estimate, and that is not due to fraud, but due to error, and that is because of the estimation and assumptions that go into the allowance for the student loans. And then we also spend a lot of time evaluating the IT systems at this organization, and the control environment and the application controls that we have our separate IT team working on those procedures. If you go to the next slide, this slide again talks about some other significant areas of the audit. We talked about the student loans and then we also spend time on the debt covenants, compliance for debts. Other areas that, maybe there's not a significant estimate, but there's just such a large balance that we do a lot of procedures substantively to get comfortable with those balances. So the completeness and existence of the financial assistance, the expenses, as well as the grants, revenues, and receivables there. So the next slide just talks about who we involve as others in the audit. We do have an actuary that helps review the pension obligations, and we also actually do involve internal audit. That's not listed here, but we involve internal audit in the audit as well as a subcontractor for the historically underutilized business. So they do part of the audit for us. Audit timeline is very consistent from prior year. We do the majority of risk assessment in the January through March period, and then begin the audit in April and finish most of the audit procedures in May and wrap up in May and June. And then we'll be back to present in July the audit results. Supplemental communications, this is pretty boilerplate information, so I'm not going to go over all that. I think it's a little skewed on your slide deck here. But materiality in the context of the audit, that's determined by the judgment of the auditors. But we do discuss with management, have historical experience with organizations of this size on what materiality makes sense. With a governmental entity, materiality is always a little bit more complicated because there's various opinion units that we are setting our materiality on, and we will benchmark that as a percent depending on what the most relevant metric is for that opinion unit. And we'll have secondary benchmarks as well that we compare those to. So very consistent with prior year, so nothing really to note there. And I won't go over the responsibilities. We just have this in there as additional information. But I will turn it over to Susan to talk about the results of the single audit.
Thank you. I am here as part of our annual plan. We usually come back to you and also present the results of the statewide single audit that was issued in February. And the coordinating board's loan program is a part of that audit done with the state auditor's office. And so it was issued in February, but here are the results that were in that report with regard to the coordinating board. You'll notice that there actually was one finding included. So as a reminder, the federal government sets certain thresholds that if we find a difference in the rules that they've asked us to look at, that we need to report to the federal government. So they set all that judgment for us. And we did have one situation that we needed to report. It was very minor. So I like to tell people that there are different kinds of findings. The one you got was the best kind you can get. It was the lowest on the chart. So, you know, we didn't have any other judgment there. But basically there was a finding in 16 where you need to put some additional controls in over due diligence of loans. You did that. You responded to that comment. But in the process of that, there was a little bit of a window where some of the loans were still under the old process, but they were in the 17 fiscal year. We happened to pick one of those, auditor's luck, right? And so it technically wasn't done timely on the telephone calls. But it was one loan out of 40, and the controls were already working, so we just had to report the one loan. It's what I call a technical file if you play basketball. It's kind of one of those things. The other items on here are what we call control deficiencies or verbal comments. At the request of the board, you have asked us to bring those to you. These were not in the written report that went to the federal government or the governor's office, so these were discussed with your management team at our formal exit in February, and that's where it was left. But as your request, we are presenting those to you. So the first one here on the slide was there is a special test the government asked us to look at related to Civil Relief Act. Basically, service members get a reduced interest rate. Staff here were aware of that rule, but there were some technical challenges with the interface with the government and being able to get in there and record those loans and give them the 6% rate. You only had 3 that were involved. We did 100% search, if you will. Our IT team helped us with that query. And so it wasn't considered a significant ordeal. Imagine 3 loans out of your entire portfolio. So that's why we left it, and we didn't have to report to the government. It didn't reach the threshold for reporting. So there was 3 of those, and you did correct all those. You just had, it was a technical issue with the system. So they've been corrected. The next slide has a couple of IT comments on it. As we have mentioned, we do spend a lot of time on the IT systems, both on the financial audit and the single audit. And so there was Helms and HelmsNet. We found a couple of accounts that were no longer needed, basically what we call inactive accounts. The good news here is you can see the mitigating factors on each of the slide. That's the reason why we didn't have to report it up. Was that these were owned by system administrators, so they were limited to who could use the accounts, and so there was no risk, basically, in them being inappropriately used. On the bottom of the page, as you remember, you implemented your new loan system in April of 17. That was subject to the single audit last year. One of the things we looked at was the post-implementation user access review. So that once you got it up and running, did everybody have the right roles and privileges for segregation of duties? Some of the documentation that should have been maintained we couldn't find, but you can find in the mitigating factors there that we were able to talk to various people and know that it had occurred. It just wasn't all nicely filed up in one place for us to look at. We did look at the June 2017, the next review, and saw that it was all properly done. So again, we didn't elevate it up to a written comment. This one, there was, again, related to the transition to the new system. We do look at some of what we call test scenarios. I'm sure you all remember those being discussed. There was a bunch of test scenarios to make sure this loan's going to process right, this payment's going to process right, things like that. So as an auditor, we come in to make sure you've done your due diligence in that area. There were 2 of those that we picked out of 25, where again, all the documentation wasn't together for us. But again, we were able to cooperate with management that it had all been done, and we could see that the critical scenario list had been officially all checked off and signed before it went live. So again, no concerns there other than the fact that some of the documentation we asked for wasn't available. At the bottom of the page, there were some password settings that didn't agree to policy, but again, service accounts, so restricted, minimizing the risk. And then during the transition period from the old system to the new system on the loans, you can see it there, September 16th to April 17th. One of the limitations of the old system was the ability to have different parameters on your passwords. And so it didn't match your actual written policy, which was better. It was more in line with best practices. So by going to the new system, you were able to get up to those industry standards that you have in your policy. So we just noted that was a timing issue from that perspective. Those are the results of the statewide single audit. Does anybody have any questions?
Dr. Frias.
So last time you were here, Ms. Warren, you've done a great job over the years since I've been on the board since
Thank you.
2015, but I thought you said this is the last time you'll see me because we're rotating.
I am. David's the financial partner. I'm the
Right.
single audit partner. Two
Okay.
different things.
Right, okay, so, and you're back, obviously, because,
I'm back because you asked to hear the results of the single audit.
but I mean, did it, when we saw, that was in February, correct, you said?
Yes.
Okay, so you're coming back just to see for us to hear the final results of the
Yes, sir. It was
concerns?
Yes, it was at
Okay.
your request, so I came back.
Okay.
I think I can help.
Okay.
Kind of distinguish between the audit, the external audit that the board directs for the agency to conduct. That is what David is in charge
I
of.
think what happened is that you sort of segued into the next item, is that?
Yes, she
Yeah.
did. So there's
sorry.
two
that's
agenda
all right.
items that we've covered. And then Susan is heading up for the SAO, the State Auditor's Office, the single audit. So they're two separate audits, so.
It's
that-
done by the same firm, so.
Right.
Oh, we're operating very efficiently. You passed the baton before I announced it
You
on
can
here.
tell we work together.
Okay, I got it. Okay,
My
thank you.
apologies. I didn't realize it was two separate agenda items. I should have known
Yes,
better.
okay, no, thank you, that answered it.
Yes, I'm not here for the financial audit.
I'll stand over here.
I'll second what Dr. Frias says. You've done an outstanding job
thank
for
you.
us, so we're glad to have you here today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay. All right, any other questions or comments? I think we move to the last item under internal audit is an update on internal audit reports and activities. This item does not require any action. Oh, thank y'all. Y'all have to leave, okay. Appreciate it. Okay, Mr. Pale, Mark Pale, Director of Internal Audit and Compliance, will present this update to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Steen and members. This is an informational item, and we report on our internal audit efforts since the previous meeting, which in this case was January. We're in the fieldwork stage of several projects, so you do not have any finalized reports in your package for this meeting. The projects in progress are listed on your agenda page. One thing I did want to talk briefly with you about is we adopted a new external audit policy. We used the feedback, if you'll recall from the October AOC meeting, there was a discussion about external auditor independence and external auditor rotation. And so we took those comments to heart and took a look at that and developed a new policy. I think there's a copy at your place there. It's a one-pager. It's pretty simple. But, basically, we're attempting to balance the risk of an external auditor becoming too comfortable after being retained for many, many years consecutively versus the risk of an external auditor being uninformed of particularly in the nuances of an organization. You've heard a lot of discussion today about the nuances of this agency and its student loan program. So that's a good example of where we want to make sure that our external auditors are well-versed in those complexities. So the policy that we've adopted requires competitive solicitation of the agency's external auditor once every 5 years, and this is typically done as an annual contract in year 1 with options to extend in years 2 through 5. In the event that the same firm wins the solicitation for a second 5-year period, the auditor rotation provision would apply. That would be a 2-year cooling off period where the engagement partners would be required to change. The policy also requires a change of audit firms after 10 consecutive years of engagements. Both the partner rotation and the change of audit firm requirements does have an opt-out provision for, the policy says when there are compelling reasons not to do so. Those reasons could be economic, operational, or both. Change of significant software systems might be an example where you would not want to change an audit firm, for example. So there is a copy of the policy that you've been provided, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any on that or any of our other work. Otherwise, that concludes this update.
I think the policy's well done, but we don't need to adopt it. This is something that you've done with your...
That's correct. It's just informational.
Any other questions or comments? All right. What else do you have, Mr. Pale?
I have a compliance
Oh,
monitoring.
that's right, okay. And by the way, thank you for your good reports, and I don't always respond, but I am reading them, so appreciate
Thank you.
your good work, continuing good work.
Yes, and I was going to just comment how, with the new additions to your staff, how is that going?
Excellent. Yeah, we're
Okay, so
we're
that's
fully
one good thing
staffed
this
and
board has done, right? To help that.
we're very happy to have the help, and yes, I have a strong team.
Good.
All right, the first item under compliance monitoring is an update on compliance monitoring reports and activities. This item does not require any action. Mr. Pale.
Thank you. This is, again, a short report. We have 7 projects that we completed since the previous meeting, and so those reports are in your materials. The reports concluded 2 formula funding and 5 financial aid-related engagements. There's only 1 report of the 7 that contained a recommendation. That was the audit of formula funding at Kilgore College. The issue raised in this report related to weak information security controls over enrollment data and the need for the college to do a better job of tracking changes to information so that we can have assurance over data accuracy and reliability. And we'll be, as in the case of any of our recommendations, we'll be doing follow-up work to make sure that the corrective actions were taken. And that concludes the compliance monitoring update.
Good. I like these short reports. You continue to do outstanding work. We appreciate your
Thank you. I
job you're
appreciate
doing.
that.
Any other questions or comments, sir? Well, we're here, right? This concludes the Agency Operations Committee meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, Mr. Plank, second, Dr. Frias? You're thinking about it?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
So we walk in
Just in time.
when Senator West started talking to you.